The early 20th century, an era when humanity believed in its own omnipotence. Steam locomotives raced along the rails, electricity lit up the streets, telephones connected cities, and ocean liners seemed the pinnacle of technology. The world was changing rapidly. People said, "Man has conquered nature." And in this atmosphere of ambition and competition, the company White Star Line decided to build a liner that would surpass everything humanity had ever known. A ship of legend, a ship of pride, a ship that would challenge the very forces of nature. They gave it a mythical name, Titanic, a word that recalled the ancient Greek Titans, defeated by Zeus himself. This was meant to be a ship of giants, invincible, unsinkable. The idea of the Titanic did not appear out of nowhere. It was the era of fierce competition. The Cunard Line already had record-breaking liners, Lusitania and Mauretania. They were the fastest ships of their time. White Star Line chose another path. Not speed, but size, comfort, and luxury would make its fleet unrivaled. In 1908, the decision was made to build three giants, Olympic, Titanic, and Britannic. Their construction was entrusted to the Harland Wolff shipyard in Belfast. The Titanic became a true engineering marvel. Length, almost 300 meters. Height, like an 11-story building. Weight, more than 46,000 tons. 29 boilers turned the massive propellers, electric elevators, telephone lines, central heating. For the early 20th century, it was almost science fiction. The ship was designed as a floating city. Watertight bulkheads could withstand flooding in 4 compartments. This feature created the myth. The Titanic is unsinkable. Newspapers wrote, "On board the Titanic, a man is safer than on land." Autumn 1911. The ship was launched. Its silhouette with 4 funnels amazed the world. And although one of the funnels was purely decorative, it gave the Titanic its iconic look. April 1912. The ship was ready for its maiden voyage. First-class tickets cost a fortune, thousands of dollars. But even a ticket in third class was considered luck for an emigrant. The world held its breath. The unsinkable ship was about to cross the Atlantic. April 10th, 1912. Southampton, England. Crowds gathered in the port to witness the marvel of engineering, the greatest liner of its age. On its decks were gathered people from every walk of life, millionaires and aristocrats, merchants and workers, emigrants seeking a new life in America. Among them was billionaire John Jacob Astor, the wealthiest man on board, philanthropist Margaret Brown, later known as the unsinkable Molly Brown, millionaire Benjamin Guggenheim, and alongside them, families of immigrants from Ireland, Italy, and Eastern Europe. They all shared one thing: faith in a miracle called the Titanic. At noon, the giant ship raised anchor. The orchestra played, passengers waved handkerchiefs, and people's eyes shone with the sense that they were part of history. The Titanic sailed first to Cherbourg, France, then to Queenstown, Ireland, and from there to New York. At that moment, it seemed as though ahead lay only joy and triumph. But the Titanic's immortality would take on another meaning. The Titanic was not just a ship. It was a floating palace. In first class, crystal chandeliers glittered, handmade carpets softened each step, and vast marble staircases gleamed with bronze sculptures. The grand dining hall was designed in the style of Versailles. On the tables, porcelain, crystal, and silver, Turkish baths, a gymnasium, a library, smoking lounges, a sunlit cafe, and even a heated swimming pool, unheard of at sea. Even in third class, conditions astonished passengers. Spacious cabins, separate dining rooms, clean bedding. For emigrants accustomed to the filth and crowding of other ships, it was almost a miracle. The Titanic was designed so that every passenger, from billionaires to peasants, would feel safe. The ship had kitchens, laundries, doctors, musicians. A small floating city sailing proudly through the cold waters of the Atlantic. But behind all this luxury lay irony. The ship had only 20 lifeboats, enough for just half the passengers and crew. But no one worried. After all, everyone believed the Titanic is unsinkable. April 14th, 1912. The Atlantic greeted the morning with clear skies. The sun lit the decks. Ladies strolled in long dresses. Gentlemen smoked expensive cigars. Children played. The day seemed calm, but shadows were gathering. Throughout the day, the Titanic's radio received messages from other ships. Icebergs ahead. Some reached the bridge. Others were buried under stacks of private telegrams being sent to New York at the request of wealthy passengers. That evening, an especially alarming warning came. The Californian had stopped in an ice field and reported drifting bergs. But Titanic's wireless operator, overwhelmed with work, snapped back. "Shut up, I'm busy." A sign from fate. Ignored. Night fell, moonless, windless, and bitter cold. The ocean turned into black glass, the worst possible conditions for spotting ice. On watch stood 25-year-old Frederick Fleet, but he had no binoculars. The officer who carried the key to the locker hadn't sailed. Fleet had only his eyes. At 11:40 p.m., he spotted a dark shape ahead. The lookout bell rang 3 times, and his trembling voice came through the speaking tube. "Iceberg right ahead!" On the bridge, First Officer William Murdoch shouted, "Hard to port! Full astern!" The giant engines roared as the rudder swung. But it was too late. Fate had made its choice. Out of the darkness, like a phantom, rose the iceberg. A massive frozen wall turned black side toward the ship. Nature itself had struck, and the blow came. A terrible grinding sound ripped through the night. Steel tore open like paper. The berg scraped along the starboard side, leaving a jagged wound almost 300 feet long. The Titanic was built to survive flooding in 4 compartments, but water poured into 6. In the lower decks, men felt the floor drop beneath them. Sparks flew in the boiler rooms, steam pipes shook violently, and a deep rumble echoed through the hull. Up above, passengers barely noticed. Just a faint shudder, a bump, a shrug, and life continued. But in the bowels of the ship, men already knew. The Titanic was mortally wounded. The voyage's fate was sealed. On deck, almost nothing had changed. In the restaurants, passengers kept dining. In the smoking lounges, men finished their card games. Many thought the ship had simply stopped for a maneuver. But below, a desperate battle with the sea had begun. Engineers closed bulkhead doors and switched on the pumps. Firemen shoveled coal furiously into the furnaces, keeping the lights and heat alive. Captain Smith summoned Chief Designer Thomas Andrews. Together, they inspected the flooded compartments. Andrews silently made his calculations and finally said, "The ship will last an hour, maybe an hour and a half. No more." The words struck like a sentence. There was no plan to save everyone. Even if all lifeboats were filled to capacity, only half of those on board could be rescued. 12:05 a.m. The captain ordered the lifeboats to be prepared. According to protocol, the crew began with women and children. But the passengers did not believe in danger. The first lifeboat left the Titanic carrying only 28 people, though it could hold 65. Many refused to leave the giant ship. Some women would not abandon their husbands. Others laughed. Why step into a tiny boat when we are on the largest ship in the world? On the upper decks, the orchestra played cheerful waltzes, masking the fear and keeping up an illusion of safety. They would play until the very end. But in third class, passengers were trapped behind locked gates and corridors. At first, priority was given to first and second class women and children. That decision alone sealed the fate of hundreds. By 1:11 a.m., the ship's list was undeniable. Water reached deck C. Panic began to grow. Families cried out for each other. Crew shouted, "Women and children first!" Men stepped back, many saying their last goodbyes. Some lifeboats still had empty seats, but there were too few sailors left to lower them. The crew was overwhelmed on the opposite side of the ship. Lifeboat number 6 rowed away with only 25 people aboard. Among them was Margaret Brown, who would later be remembered as the unsinkable Molly Brown. She pleaded with the crew to return and rescue those drowning in the freezing water, but almost no one agreed. On deck, the chaos deepened. Some prayed, some screamed, some tried to fight their way forward, yet discipline still held, enforced by officers and the iron will of the captain. 2:01 a.m. The bow of the Titanic was completely submerged. The stern rose nearly 40 degrees into the air. People clung to railings, clustered in terrified groups. The orchestra played the hymn, "Nearer, My God, to Thee." Its notes drifted over the chaos, becoming the last soundtrack of the Titanic. At 2:18 a.m., the ship broke in two. The bow plunged into the depths. The stern stood upright for a few fleeting seconds. Before it too collapsed into the ocean's black maw. The roar of water drowned out the cries. In the icy darkness, hundreds fought for life. But the temperature of the sea was near freezing. Few could survive more than 20 minutes. One by one, voices calling for help grew weaker and faded into silence. 2 hours later, the steamship Carpathia arrived. It rescued just 706 survivors. More than 1,500 people remained forever in the cold Atlantic. The disaster was not only nature's work, it was the result of a chain of human errors. The Titanic had sailed at nearly full speed, 22.5 knots, through dangerous waters. Warnings of ice had been ignored. Wireless operators were busy sending private telegrams for wealthy passengers. The moonless night made the Iceberg invisible. The ship's design could withstand flooding in 4 compartments, but 6 were torn open. Rivets made from low-quality metal gave way under pressure, and fate turned on something as small as this. The lookout had no binoculars. The loss of the Titanic forced the world to change. Maritime laws were rewritten. From then on, every ship had to carry lifeboats for all aboard. Wireless operators were required to keep watch around the clock. Ice patrols were established in the North Atlantic. The Titanic had become a symbol of human pride and a grim reminder. Even the greatest achievements can fall not only to nature's fury, but to human mistakes. For decades, the Titanic lay lost, hidden in the ocean's depths. Only in 1985 did oceanographer Robert Ballard and his team discover the wreck, lying nearly 4 kilometers down. The hull was split in two, draped in eerie rust-colored stalactites, rusticles formed by iron-eating bacteria. Around it lay a graveyard of belongings, shoes, porcelain dishes, letters, jewelry, children's toys. Silent witnesses to that night. Expeditions followed. Hundreds of artifacts were recovered. Silverware stamped with White Star Line's crest, elegant watches stopped at the moment of disaster, handwritten notes and wedding rings still shining in the dark. These relics toured the world in exhibitions, reminding millions of the Titanic's grandeur and tragedy. But the ship lived on not only in relics, it became legend. Books, documentaries, and in 1997, James Cameron's film Titanic, one of the most famous movies in history. Through it, new generations saw the story not as distant history, but as a human tragedy of love, courage, and loss. Today, the Titanic remains a symbol of human ambition and human fragility, a symbol of progress and its illusions, a symbol of how even the mightiest creation can perish from a single collision with nature. And yet, the memory of the Titanic does not sink.